lovely that you're here. I'm Cokie Roberts, and I'm here to support this wonderful endeavor to try to make our politicians behave. And it is a worthy goal. Today, ABC News released a poll that showed 2/3 of Americans think that they have little or no influence over the actions of the federal government. And that is a disconnection from government that affects everything, because then people don't trust the government and on it goes. And part of the reason they feel that way is because they don't feel connected to the I was going to say action here, but of course it's inaction here. I mean, to me, the greatest indictment that there is that they cannot get their act together to fund money to fight the Zika virus. And here it is, spreading through our states today. 7 new cases in Michigan, and they can't do it. So it is, with the scientists all over the hill saying it would make an enormous difference, we really need this, they still can't do it. Now, I assume by the end of the week they might, but still, it's pathetic. And so Suzanne Furstenberg, rather than just throw her arms up and the way that most of us do in these kinds of situations, decided to try to take action and put a lot of other people to action and start to try to connect with David and Evan and the movement and other people in a movement and create a bigger movement to take flight and to try to get people to actually do something about this inability of the Congress to act, the incivility in the government and in the body politic, and to start the one thing that would work, which is to start punishing politicians for not cooperating instead of punishing them for cooperating, which is the current situation. So she started Updraft America. She got everybody she knew to fold congressional records. I actually resisted because I kept saying it's paper cut city, but I was happy to sort of be there in kibitz while others did it. She folded every congressional record from August 1st, 2015 to August 1st, 2016, which is probably right. And people all over the country started joining her and created these paper airplanes that are symbolic of what she wanted to accomplish. So I'm going to introduce Suzanne, let her take it from there, and then we'll have some conversations about all of this. I'm going to lead this discussion among these 3 lovely ladies, and then David's going to lead a discussion among 3 people involved in the alliance, and then we'll take your questions. So these really are kind of lightning speed panels. We're not going to keep you here till midnight. Let me just introduce Rebecca. Was for many years at WJLA here in Washington, after having been at pretty much every network.
I didn't get fired. I just had a curiosity to work in a lot of places.
I worked with her at various times and happily. She's now the executive in residence here at American University in the Kogod School of Business. And she has been looking at a new initiative on business in the Capitol. And she's just completed some research with top business leaders, which is not going to be released until next week, but she'll give us a peek, right? And Nomi Kunst has been someone that you've probably seen on television. She's been a commentator and advisor. She ran for Congress herself, God love her. No, because that's the right thing to do. And has been...
Until you know better.
No, keep doing it. And has been very, very active in this space. And Francine Kiefer has been at the Christian Science Monitor for many years as White House correspondent, congressional correspondent, and just world-class reporter. And the Christian Science Monitor is actually doing something that is not normally done by a journalistic institution, because we get all, just sort of in a warp about what's fair and what's not fair, and should we take sides and should we not take sides, and should we be involved in the whole business of trying to influence how government operates in any which way. And the Christian Science Monitor basically said, enough. So Francine, tell us what you're doing.
Thank you, Cokie. Appreciate it. Well, I'll just name a few of the things that we're doing. Before I was the congressional reporter, I was the op-ed editor, and I got really tired of seeing left and right commentary only. So I created a new commentary format, and it was called Common Ground, Common Good. And I invited commentators from Washington, from overseas, local government, average Joes, to submit pieces about how they were finding common ground in their sphere. Now, I'm sorry to say that in the ever search for making journalism revenues work in the internet age, that that project didn't last because we stopped having commentary and used that money for something else. But it got off to a good start, and there was a lot of interest in it, and I would encourage media to do that. Then I took that idea of common ground, common good, and I decided to apply that lens to my new job as a congressional correspondent. And I have pretty much made it my mission to look for people and issues that are finding common ground. And just one little example, when Senator Susan Collins from Maine failed to get bipartisan gun legislation, I used that as an opportunity to say, well, okay, maybe she failed, but she got more Republicans on board on gun legislation than ever before. And I used it as an opportunity to point to her as a bridge builder in Congress. So those are a couple things. And then we're on our election coverage. We have a special feature called The Politics of Us. And it takes 10 polarizing issues. It seeks to describe them and do stories in ways that allow for real understanding of the other side, and it has several other tools with it. We've partnered with a group called Living Room Conversations, so you can take these ideas and have discussions about them. And we've also partnered with something called allsides.com, which rates through crowdsourcing public opinion on whether newspaper and media articles are fair. And I have to say, the Monitor gets the prize because we are always called the most fair according to crowdsourcing.
How is the response?
You know, I get good response from elites, which just shows that lawmakers and others, they're just as frustrated as we are, believe it or not. Lawmakers are just as frustrated as we are, and I think they need the space to be much more brave than they're being right now. And as far as from, people out there in readership land, when we were running the Common Ground, Common Good, I got lots of great feedback from people. Now, our latest election tools, what we're doing, we've just started it, so I'm not sure what the feedback is on that.
And Naomi, as you look at these issues that we can all agree what the problem is, what is your way of saying how to fix it?
Oh my goodness, really?
Well, I mean, where do you point your finger?
I think that for the most part, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right or in the center, or what generation you're from or what demographic you're from. I think most people who are aware of how government functions knows that there's systemic issues that just get in the way. When Congress spends most of its time, 70–80% of its time, raising money, that means they're across the street from Congress dialing for dollars or going out and fundraising, not dealing with each other, not talking to each other, not grabbing drinks with each other like the old times, not building relationships, not understanding where common ground is. That also means that they're raising money to, we know this stuff, they're raising money to buy ads. They buy ads to divide us, to appeal to certain demographics that win them elections, that win them primaries. And so it's just the systemic issues that make us, that create this dialogue, this extreme dialogue, is what's preventing our lawmakers from communicating with each other. And you know, it's even though I am on the left, full disclosure, I wasn't always on the left. When I ran for Congress, I ran as a pretty moderate Arizonan, but I'm a millennial, and I saw my generation this election cycle. Initially, I supported Joe Biden last year when there was that whole, is he going to run, is he not going to run, what's going to happen, and we're staking out in front of his house, what's going to happen. But the reason why I supported him was I saw how he brought both sides together. And it didn't matter if you agreed with him on all the issues, he just universally seemed to be recognized as somebody who could speak to the other side.
So is he going to run?
I think it's a little late. I don't know if he can get on the ballot in all the states. Exactly. But with that being said, I saw what was happening with my generation, that 75% of millennials were supporting this candidate, and so many of them were independents who didn't trust the government, who didn't trust institutions, but believed in American values. They believed in transparency. They believed in campaign finance reform. It wasn't even a social or an economic sort of mentality. It was about fixing the way government functioned. And so I started to, at first I just was covering the election. I was going out there interviewing people. And I saw that there was something happening. It was transformative. And whether you agree with Bernie Sanders' policies or not, it was really amazing to see how somebody who'd been in office for so long was speaking to a demographic that really had never interacted with him before. And I saw that if there's one thing that's united this next generation, it's that they all agree the problems are systemic and they need to be addressed. And they saw a candidate who wasn't working the system the way, I mean, you can't disagree with that. He did something unique in presidential politics, and that was he wasn't playing the game that we all know it to be played. And that's, I think, why there needs to be something unique, and maybe it is about the way that we run politicians. Maybe it's that we're raising money across the street from Congress rather than going out there and speaking in our districts or talking to voters or getting on the ground and really feeling what they're feeling. And maybe, you know, this is the beginning of a new wave. I hope so, because the numbers show that 75%, 80% of those under 40 want to change the way that the system is. And they can be on the left, they can be on the right, or they can be independents, because that's, I think, where the real number is. 43% of our country right now is made up of independents.
Rebecca, you have just done this survey, and you asked the fundamental question: if you could come in to the new president and give one recommendation on changing policy or changing law, what would it be?
That's right. Thank you. Cokie has been a wonderful friend and mentor to me for many years, and I have a story that I'll share later about a late night call I made to her house that's now in the congressional record that hopefully she's forgotten. When I was working on the Hill, Steve may remember it, her husband, so don't let me forget to tell that story. But I was jotting down notes when I was sitting in the audience because I was shaking my head so much, because I hate to be predictable, I'm one of those 43% independents. I was a young Republican in high school, and then I'm a wonk, that's why I'm an American. I decided that President Reagan wasn't being fair to Paul Volcker. I was a debate geek, and I decided that I was more of a Democrat. And I came to Washington, and I realized that there were really smart Democrats and really smart Republicans and really dumb Democrats and really dumb Republicans. And I wanted to talk to both sides. And when I first came to Washington, when you got out of college and you wanted to change the world, you went into government. And then I would see 60 Minutes come to the Hill, or Cokie Roberts come to the Hill and shine the spotlight. Cokie was always there, but she was always shining her spotlight on an issue. And once the media shined their spotlight on an issue, instead of spending years on something that needed to be fixed, we were able to do it in a few weeks. So sometimes the media can be the answer. But then I started seeing that now young people actually see business as a way to go and change the world. And that became really intriguing to me because I got frustrated covering Congress. I had worked on Capitol Hill, and I had seen a lot accomplished in the years that I worked there. And then I became a journalist and kind of fell into this period where a lot wasn't getting accomplished, and we were having government shutdowns. And I started looking around and seeing who was changing the world. And in some ways, it started being the business leaders in a really intriguing way to me. And one thing I learned, and one of the reasons I left politics to go into journalism, is I'm never the smartest person in the room. I just seek out the smartest person in the room and I ask them questions. And I found it's much easier to ask questions of other people who've had the experience than to find the solution. So I try and have smart conversations with smart people finding solutions. So the Kogod School of Business, what we have been compiling over these many months, while Suzanne was busy making a very powerful statement with her art and why I wanted to be here, we've been compiling answers from the top minds in the country who are business leaders, small business owners, startup founders, government leaders, but also CEOs of Fortune 100 companies, and asking them, if you're called into the White House in January and asked by the president for one recommendation to grow the economy, what would it be? Now, Jamie Dimon is very smart and gave the answer, well, there is not one solution, so there's many. And we said, yes, you're right. So we got lots and lots of recommendations. I'm not going to take up time here tonight. We're releasing our report September 22nd. Ali Yaris is here from Kogod School of Business. They're doing lots of work on it. You're going to see it on our website. But my message from that is we got a lot of great ideas. We got fascinating ideas. The one that we got most frequently was a surprise to me. It's a good idea. It wasn't what I would have predicted would be a top 5. And it was a top 5 for Fortune 100 CEOs and startups and small businesses and government leaders. So stay tuned for that. But we also got...
That is totally not fair.
No.
That is totally not fair.
We also got answers from some people that was the only answer to that effect. The Ford Motor Company CEO, his answer was a very good one, but he was the only one who provided that answer. So the point of that is there are lots of good answers. And even on ones where there was commonality on the issue, there were differences on how it should be approached. The number one answer, there was some commonality. But on a lot of other things, there was differences. And what I found in doing this survey was there are so many good ideas out there, and we're not talking about them. And we're not giving young people a way to listen to them. And Donald Trump spoke about his economic plan today, and he talked about growing the economy and his goal of 4% gross economic growth, and the applause was so tepid. And let me tell you something coming from the business school, 4% would be amazing, but it's much more interesting to say, but we're going to build a wall to do it. And the applause you can hear throughout the land. But to talk about some of the things that were needed to really grow the economy and provide jobs for millennials, which guess what, they actually do care about, that takes a little bit more of a sober dissecting.
Whole Foods is expensive.
Whole Foods is very expensive. Thank you, girlfriend. I got 3 kids. I can barely afford it, and I lived attached to it in an apartment that was costing me everything I could. I thought I was going to go to Bloomingdale's. I went to Whole Foods. So, last message I'm going to give to you, and then we can leave lots of it for Kokie's good questions. Artists can also change the world. When I worked in the Senate, something very fundamental happened in a few different parts of the world, and every time, artists were involved. And that was democracy. And when the students of Tiananmen Square rose up, they built a papier-mâché Statue of Liberty. And it was the art students who built it. And when Václav Havel, a playwright, ran to be the president of Czechoslovakia, look it up in his books. He's written these wonderful books, and he has books of letters. And he says, the problem is not enough playwrights get involved in politics because it's everything they hate. And when I was a young student and I went to Berlin, and I was there when there was still an East and West Berlin, I was so struck in West Berlin by this sculpture of grocery carts. And there was this big controversy because the taxpayers of West Berlin said, that's kind of a stupid sculpture, and why are we paying for it? And the community rose around it and said, we love it because we have a sculpture of grocery carts, and right on the other side of that wall, they're not allowed that sculpture. So whether you get it or not, the artists have a way of expressing things, and there's a million ways to interpret the grocery carts. But the point is, it was there, and artists were making a statement, and it needed to be discussed. So when Suzanne came to me, I said, I love this. I'm an independent, but I know so many smart people on both sides, and they all have great ideas. And the artist can be the vehicle for telling people, take flight, get involved, break through this gridlock with your paper airplanes, pierce through that wall, and let's talk about smart things. There's a lot of smart things in the congressional record, including the speech that I wrote that I interviewed Cokie and Steve Roberts for, that I'll tell you about later. But the point is, it all comes together, and it can come together right here in Washington. A lot of our students at American University don't always cross the street from Katzen to the other part of the campus because they don't see the link. I make sure to come in this building every single day before I go to Kogod Business School because everyone's a part of the conversation and everyone has really smart things to contribute. I don't, so I'm going to end it right there, Cokie, and let other people ask the questions.